The key turned, but the lock didn't. That was the first thing that told me something was wrong. I stood on the front porch of the house I grew up in, my overnight bag at my feet, rain spotting the sleeves of my coat, twisting the key again like maybe the door just needed persuasion. It didn't budge. Same dead resistance, same quiet refusal. This was my house, or at least it had been. The place where my height was penciled into the pantry wall, where my mother burned pot roast every Thanksgiving and laughed it off, where my father taught me how to replace a fuse and told me, everything worth keeping needs maintenance. Yet the lock didn't recognize me anymore. I stepped back and looked closer. New hardware, brushed nickel instead of the old brass. The deadbolt was installed cleanly, professionally. Not a panic change, a planned one. My sister's car sat in the driveway. That's when the tightness started in my chest. Inside, through the living room window, I could see movement. Boxes stacked neatly. Furniture shifted just enough to feel unfamiliar. The couch angled differently. The lamp my mother loved, gone. I knocked. It took a while, long enough that I almost turned away before the door finally opened. My sister stood there in socks, holding a mug, surprised but not shocked. "Oh," she said. "You're early." Early. My mother had been gone less than a week. "I couldn't get in," I said. She blinked once, then shrugged. "Yeah, we had the locks changed." "We." She stepped aside without inviting me in. I walked past her anyway. The house smelled different. Lemon cleaner, cardboard, progress. Dad said it was better this way, she added casually, as if explaining a paint color. You know, fewer complications. I looked around. The family photos were still on the wall, but some were missing. My graduation picture was gone. The framed photo of me and Mom at the lake, gone. My sister's wedding portrait, though, sat front and center, freshly dusted. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "Upstairs, going through paperwork." Paperwork. I didn't go upstairs yet. I walked through the living room, the dining room, the hallway. Small things screamed louder than big ones. The desk drawer didn't stick anymore. The rug had been rotated to hide a stain. The cabinet where Mom kept important documents was open and empty. That cabinet had always been locked. My mother was meticulous, quiet, observant. She noticed things people thought invisible. And before she died, she'd squeezed my hand harder than necessary and whispered something that hadn't made sense at the time. "Don't trust what looks tidy." I felt it then. The truth wasn't gone. It had just been moved. And the house knew exactly where it was hiding. I waited until I heard the shower turn on upstairs. That's the thing about families. You don't need permission to move through their spaces. You just need timing. The cabinet where my mother kept documents was empty, but the absence felt staged, like a crime scene scrubbed too clean. I knelt anyway, running my fingers along the back panel. She taught me this as a kid, turning it into a game. "If something matters," she'd said, "it never lives where it's supposed to." The panel shifted. Barely. Just enough. Behind it was a narrow envelope, yellowed at the edges, taped flat like someone expected time to erase it. My name was written on the front in my mother's handwriting, unmistakable, slightly slanted, decisive. I didn't open it yet. Instead, I kept looking. Her desk drawer slid out smoothly now, too smoothly. Someone had fixed the rail. Inside, everything was arranged with surgical neatness, pens aligned, notepads stacked, no loose change rattling around. My mother hated order like this. She believed messiness was proof of thought. At the back of the drawer, beneath a legal pad, I found the false bottom. And inside that, copies, bank statements, property tax records, a quitclaim deed I didn't recognize, dated 3 years earlier, same house, same address, different signature, not hers. My father's handwriting was all confidence, heavy pressure, broad strokes. A man used to signing things that made other people nervous. But this signature, it hesitated. The R faltered. The last name tilted wrong. Someone had practiced it. I froze when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I slid the papers back, heart pounding, just as my sister appeared in the doorway, towel around her hair, eyes sharp despite the casual posture. "You find what you were looking for?" she asked. The question landed wrong. Too precise. I straightened. "Just memories." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Dad's been handling most of the logistics. It's a lot, you know. He didn't want to burden you." Burden. That was the word they used when they meant exclude. I nodded, playing along, but my mind was racing. My mother hadn't been sick when that deed was signed. She hadn't been forgetful, and she sure as hell wouldn't have transferred anything without telling me. That envelope burned in my pocket. Upstairs, the shower turned off, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. They didn't change the locks to keep me out. They changed them to buy time. And whatever my mother hid inside this house, they were terrified I'd already found it. I waited until night fell. Not because I was afraid of being caught, but because truth is louder when the house is quiet, when floors stop creaking from other people's footsteps, when walls stop pretending they don't remember. My father and sister stayed downstairs, voices low, glasses clinking. I could hear my name drift up the staircase once or twice, then stop abruptly, like someone had closed a door mid-thought. I went to the one room neither of them had entered since I arrived, my mother's sewing room. It sat at the end of the hall, door half closed, the way she always left it. Everyone else treated it like storage once her hands began to shake too much to thread a needle. But I knew better. She never abandoned a space. She repurposed it. The light flickered when I switched it on. Everything looked untouched at first. The old work table, the pin cushions shaped like tomatoes, the cabinet of fabric she refused to throw away because you never know. But the air felt different, charged, as if the room had been holding its breath. I opened drawers slowly, patterns, receipts, notes written in shorthand only she used. And then, behind the bottom drawer, a thin metal box bolted into the wall. No lock, just a magnetic latch. My heart started pounding as I pulled it free. Inside were recordings, cassette tapes, old-fashioned, labeled in my mother's handwriting, dates, times, names, and one envelope, thicker than the rest. If you're reading this, they've already started. That was the first line. My hands shook as I read on. She wrote calmly, methodically, not like someone afraid, but like someone documenting a process. Conversations she'd overheard. Meetings my father thought were private. The slow way control had shifted in the house without her consent. He thought I wouldn't notice the account changes. He thought illness made me smaller. He forgot I was the one who kept everything running before he learned how to pretend. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, as the house hummed around me. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Careful. Not my sister's. My father stopped outside the door, didn't knock, just stood there. And in that moment I understood something that made my skin go cold. He knew exactly what room I was in, and he was deciding whether to come in or to pretend this room, like so many things before it, no longer mattered. He didn't come in. The floorboard outside the sewing room creaked once, a deliberate sound, then his footsteps retreated. Slow. Controlled. Like a man reminding himself that retreat can still look like authority. I waited a full minute before moving, then another. Only when the house settled back into its artificial calm did I turn my attention to the tapes. There were 12 of them, lined up with obsessive care. My mother never did anything halfway. Each cassette had a handwritten label, dates, initials, locations, kitchen, office, car, and then one, at the very end, marked simply, "For you." I slid it into the old tape recorder she kept on the shelf, the one she refused to throw out even after everything went digital. She said analog couldn't be altered without leaving scars. The machine whirred to life. Static. A breath. Then her voice, softer than I remembered, but unmistakably steady. "If you're hearing this," she said, "it means I didn't get the chance to say it out loud." My throat tightened. I know they think you're uninvolved. That distance equals ignorance. Let them keep thinking that. It's useful." There was a pause. Paper rustling. I noticed the first transfer 3 years ago. Small amounts. Testing what I'd catch. When I confronted him, he said it was temporary. He always says that when he plans to make something permanent. My grip tightened around the edge of the table. I documented everything. Accounts, signatures, conversations he thought I was too tired to follow. He underestimated illness, he underestimated me, he underestimated you. The tape clicked as she shifted closer to the recorder. The house is not what he thinks it is. Neither is the will, and the deed he believes protects him will be his undoing, if you let it be. Footsteps again. This time, closer. My sister's voice floated down the hall. "Dad, he's probably just unpacking." A lie, too quick, too rehearsed. I ejected the tape, heart racing, and replaced it exactly where I'd found it. The others stayed hidden, for now. Truth is most powerful when it arrives on your terms. I slipped the envelope back into the wall compartment, sealed it, restored the drawer, and stood just as my sister appeared in the doorway, arms crossed lightly like she was guarding something fragile. "Everything okay?" she asked. I smiled. "Fine, just saying goodbye." She studied me for a beat too long. Downstairs, my father cleared his throat loudly, a signal. Dinner was ready. And as I walked away from the room that held the truth, I understood something with absolute clarity. They thought they were managing an inheritance. What they were really managing was exposure, and my mother had left me the switch. Dinner was served like a closing meeting. No candles, no music. Just plates placed with purpose and glasses poured halfway, as if abundance itself needed moderation now. My father sat at the head of the table, his old position, even though my mother had always preferred that seat. My sister took the chair beside him, angled slightly inward, loyal by posture alone. I sat across from them. He didn't waste time. "We'll be listing the house," he said, cutting into his food without looking up. "Soon. The market's favorable, and there's no reason to hold on to sentiment." Sentiment, that's what they call memory when it's inconvenient. "I thought Mom wanted it kept in the family," I said evenly. My sister sighed, already tired of my resistance. She said a lot of things. People change. No, people reveal themselves. My father finally looked at me then, eyes sharp, assessing. "The estate is complex. I've handled the legal side. You'll receive your portion once everything's settled." Portion. I nodded slowly. "And the deed?" The fork paused midair. Barely, but I saw it. "What about it?" he asked. "Just curious," I said. "It's been updated recently, hasn't it?" My sister stiffened. My father's smile was thin. "Your mother agreed to certain adjustments for efficiency." Efficiency. His favorite word when he wanted something to sound inevitable. "I see," I said. "And the signatures." He swallowed. "What are you implying?" I met his eyes. "Nothing, just trying to understand the timeline." Silence pressed down on the table. Then he leaned back, voice cool. "You don't need to worry about these things. They're being handled." Handled by people who had already changed the locks. I pushed my chair back slightly. "I think I'll stay a few more days, go through Mom's things properly." My sister laughed, too loudly. "That's really not necessary." My father didn't laugh. "That room upstairs," he said casually, "the sewing room. We'll be clearing it out tomorrow." There it was, a test, a warning, a countdown. I nodded once. Okay, but inside, everything was aligning. They thought pressure would make me back down. They didn't realize my mother had already taught me the most important rule she lived by near the end. When someone rushes you, it's because time is no longer on their side. And judging by the way my father wouldn't meet my eyes anymore, time was running out fast. I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the house breathe, the tick of the thermostat, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft footfalls upstairs that told me my father was pacing. He always paced when he felt boxed in. He did it when my mother questioned expenses. He did it when clients threatened lawsuits. Motion made him feel like he was still in control. At 3:12 a.m., I got up. I didn't go to the sewing room. That's where they expected me to be sentimental, predictable. Instead, I went to the garage. The smell hit me first. Oil, dust, old cardboard. My father had never liked the garage. Too messy, too honest. That had always been my mother's domain, the place where things waited patiently until they were needed again. I pulled the cord. The light flickered on. Stacks of boxes lined the wall, most labeled in my sister's handwriting now. Donations, trash, old clothes. One box sat apart from the rest. No label, it was heavy. Inside, beneath a tarp, was the metal filing cabinet my mother used before everything went digital. I recognized the dent in the corner immediately, from the day I'd lost control of my bike and crashed into it, scraping my knee and my pride. She'd laughed and told me scars meant you'd lived. The cabinet was locked. I smiled. She never trusted locks that couldn't be opened twice. I tipped it back slightly and reached underneath, fingers brushing cold steel until I found it. The spare key taped exactly where she always hid things. Out of sight, in reach. The drawers slid open with a groan. Inside were folders marked with dates that overlapped perfectly with the transfers I'd seen earlier. More than copies this time, originals. Statements with handwritten annotations. Notes about meetings that never appeared on calendars. And at the very back, a slim folder marked Legal, Do Not File. I opened it. My pulse spiked. A revised will. Not the one my father was waving around downstairs, not the one my sister kept referencing vaguely, like a talisman. This one was notarized, witnessed, dated 6 months after the deed transfer they claimed my mother had agreed to. And it said something very different. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked, too close. Someone was awake now. I closed the drawer quietly, heart hammering, but not before slipping the folder into my bag. Evidence has weight. You feel it immediately. As I turned off the garage light, I heard my father's voice from the doorway behind me. "What are you doing down here?" he asked. Not angry, afraid. And that was the moment I knew, without a doubt, that whatever they'd tried to erase, whatever they'd rushed to control, my mother had made sure it would come back to claim them. He stood in the garage doorway like a man who'd forgotten why he came into a room. The overhead light cast shadows under his eyes, deeper than I remembered. For the first time since I arrived, he didn't look authoritative. He looked interrupted. "I couldn't sleep," I said, calm, neutral. Thought I'd take a look around. His gaze dropped to my bag, too fast. "You don't need to be digging through old things," he replied. "Your mother hated clutter." That almost made me laugh. My mother loved clutter. She just loved knowing where it all was more. "I found the filing cabinet," I said. The word found landed between us like a dropped plate. "That should have been discarded," he said sharply. "I told your sister—" "Why?" I asked. One simple word, soft, curious. "Why?" He hesitated. Not long, just enough. "Outdated paperwork," he said. "Confusing. No reason to keep it." I nodded slowly. "Funny, because Mom kept very careful records, especially near the end." His jaw tightened. "Your mother was tired," he snapped. "She was confused sometimes, you know that." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Then why was she still updating legal documents 6 months ago? Silence. Real silence this time. No pacing, no sighs, no filler words. His eyes flicked to the stairs, to the house, to the fragile illusion that everything inside still obeyed him. "You shouldn't involve yourself in things you don't understand," he said finally. "There it is," I replied quietly. "That line. You've used it my whole life." He straightened, trying to recover ground. "This is my house." I met his gaze. "Not according to the last version of Mom's will." That did it. Color drained from his face so fast it scared me. "What will?" he whispered. I held the moment. Let it stretch. Let the truth hover just out of reach. "The one you never filed," I said. The one she kept somewhere you didn't think to look. Upstairs, a door creaked. My sister, listening, watching, calculating. My father took a breath, slow and measured, the way he did before negotiations. "Let's not make this adversarial," he said. "Families handle these things privately." I nodded. "They do, when there's nothing to hide." His eyes hardened. "You think you can stop this?" he asked. I adjusted the strap of my bag, felt the weight inside. "I don't need to stop anything," I said. "I just need to let it finish." And as I walked past him, back into the house that no longer belonged to his version of the story, I realized something that made my pulse steady instead of race. The truth was no longer hidden. It was scheduled. The attorney's office smelled like lemon polish and old paper, the kind of place where truth gets flattened into neat stacks and people pretend that makes it harmless. My father arrived early. Of course he did. He always believed proximity to power meant control of it. My sister sat beside him, posture perfect, eyes already scanning exits, allies, angles. They stopped talking when I walked in. "Daniel," my father said, standing too quickly, "this isn't necessary." I set my bag down and took the empty chair across from them. "Actually, it is." The attorney entered moments later, a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and the kind of calm that comes from watching people lie professionally for decades. She nodded to my father without warmth. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "thank you for coming on short notice." He smiled tightly. "I'm still not sure why I'm here." She opened a folder, my folder, and slid a document onto the table. "Because your late wife requested this meeting," she replied. "In writing." My sister frowned. "That's not possible." "Oh," the attorney said mildly. "It is." She turned to me. "Did you bring it?" I reached into my bag and removed the revised will. The room shifted the moment it hit the table, like gravity had adjusted. My father didn't touch it. He stared. "This document," the attorney continued, "was notarized 6 months ago. It supersedes all previous filings. It includes specific instructions regarding property, assets, and, notably, conditional disclosures." "Disclosures?" my sister echoed. The attorney met her gaze. "Your mother anticipated resistance." I swallowed. "She instructed me," the attorney went on, "to delay filing until certain behaviors occurred." My father's voice cracked. "Behaviors?" "Yes," she said. "Attempts to alter access to the house, to liquidate property prematurely, to misrepresent her capacity at the time of prior transfers." Silence detonated. Then the attorney turned to me. "She named you executor," she said. "Not because she trusted you most with the money, but because she trusted you most with the truth." My sister shot to her feet. "This is manipulation. She was sick." The attorney didn't blink. "Then the recordings will be very helpful." My father finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "Recordings?" I met his eyes for the first time without flinching. "Yes," I said, "of you, planning, rushing, practicing signatures." His mouth opened, closed. And in that moment, watching decades of authority drain from his face, I realized the final thing my mother had given me. She hadn't just hidden the truth, she'd timed it, and what came next would decide not just who got the house, but who kept their name intact when the story finally went public. The attorney pressed a button on the recorder. My mother's voice filled the room, steady, unmistakable, alive in a way that made my sister flinch. "If you're hearing this," she said, "it means he's already tried to rush what I asked him not to." My father's hand trembled against the table. "I am of sound mind," my mother continued. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I also know my husband believes control is something you take quietly and explain later. This is me explaining it now." The attorney let the tape run. On it, my father's voice followed. Casual, confident, talking about moving assets before complications, about simplifying things before Daniel gets involved, about practicing a signature just in case. Each word landed like a physical blow. My sister shook her head violently. This is out of context. The attorney stopped the recording. There are 6 more. Different dates, different locations. My father stood up too fast, chair scraping loudly. You can't use this. I can, the attorney replied. And I will, unless the conditions your wife outlined are met. What conditions? He snapped. She slid another page forward. Full resignation as executor of any shared or transferred assets. Immediate reversal of the deed transfer. Written acknowledgement of misrepresentation. And a private settlement preventing further escalation. My father laughed once, sharp, broken. You're blackmailing me. No, I said quietly. She's protecting me. He turned on me then, eyes wild. You planned this. I shook my head. She did. I just stopped you from bearing it. Silence swallowed the room. My sister's voice cracked. Dad, is this true? He didn't answer. That was when everything broke. She backed away from him slowly, as if seeing a stranger. You told me this was clean. He still didn't speak. The attorney gathered the papers. You have 48 hours. As we stood to leave, my father finally found his voice. You think this makes you powerful? He asked me. I met his gaze, steady for the first time in my life. No, I said. It makes me finished being small. And as we walked out, I knew the next 48 hours wouldn't decide who got the house. They'd decide who survived the truth. The house was quiet again. Not the artificial quiet of avoidance or tension, but the honest kind, the kind that settles only after something rotten has been removed. My father signed everything within 24 hours. No fight, no appeal, no last-minute theatrics. Just signatures laid down carefully, like a man afraid to leave new marks that might be traced. He resigned from every position tied to my mother's assets. The deed was reversed. The executor role transferred cleanly. His lawyer avoided eye contact the entire time. My sister didn't call me afterward. I heard through someone else that she moved out of his place within the week. Rented an apartment across town. Started reassessing things. That was her word, reassessing, as if morality were a spreadsheet you could reorganize once it stopped working. I returned to the house alone 3 days later. The locks were still new, but now they opened for me. I walked through each room slowly, letting memory catch up with reality. The living room felt lighter without all the forced rearranging. The kitchen cabinet where my mother hid the first envelope was empty now, its job finished. Upstairs, the sewing room waited patiently, like it always had. I didn't clear it out. Some rooms earn the right to remain untouched. The attorney filed the will exactly as my mother instructed, quietly, efficiently, no announcements, no drama. The house stayed in the family, in my care, but not as a trophy, as a responsibility. That distinction mattered to her. I donated most of the furniture my father had brought in during his short reign. Restored the old pieces he'd called outdated. Fixed what could be fixed. Left what couldn't as proof that time passes whether you control it or not. On the last day before I left, I found myself standing in the doorway, keys in hand, feeling something I hadn't expected. Peace, not triumph, not satisfaction. Closure. My father sent one final message a week later, just 4 words. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond, because happiness had never been the point. The point was this. The house no longer held secrets. The truth no longer needed hiding. And I no longer needed permission to take up space in a story I'd been written out of for most of my life. My mother once told me, "Homes remember who respected them." As I locked the door behind me, I knew, without doubt, that the house remembered her. And now, finally, it remembered me too.